Hello there guys, and welcome to a video series called Wizard's Antics. I'll be your host, Chris Shinsu, and if you couldn't guess from the title, today we'll be talking about the Hippocratic effect of colonialism. Let's get started. Colonialism can be defined, in my own words, as, from the colonial one-pager, as the unwanted and forceful occupation of an inhabited territory for an occupator's own gain. Oftentimes, the occupator forces their cultural norms and structure upon the natives of the occupied territory as a way of bringing upon the blessings of society for these people. Such can be found in the book No Longer at Ease, set in the nation of Nigeria, on the cusp of achieving its independence from the British during the 1950s period. It explores themes of power, oppression, and cultural identity, and how all of these coupled together can lead to individuals to act one way or another. In today's topic, I'll be exploring the main character, Obi Okonkwo, and his perspective on navigating his life as a European-educated Nigerian. In No Longer at Ease, author Chinua Achebe shows that colonialism turns Obi Okonkwo hypocritical of his morals. Obi is an educated, progressive, and idealistic man who has grown up with European education and cultural influences. When we are first introduced to him as a character, we learn that he has grown up under extensive European influence and ideals. Such is revealed when we learn of his name, which was derived from a great mind, of which being after an relation, the mind being his father's, of course, who, his wife having borne him 4 daughters before Obi, was naturally becoming a little anxious. Being a Christian convert, in fact a catechist, he could not marry a second wife. But he was not the kind of man who carried sorrow on his face. In particular, he would not let the heathen know he was unhappy. Page 8. We later learned that he also has his own personal theories and philosophies that he abides by, like his father, where we learned that Obi's theory that the public service of Nigeria would remain corrupt until the old Africans at the top were replaced by young men from the universities was first formulated in a paper read to the Nigerian Students' Union in London, where we learned that, after a brief omission, this one survived until homecoming, located on page 44. He seems to have adopted these perspectives as a way of understanding and adapting to the European culture and norms that he has been raised to believe about Nigeria. He has adopted such European attitudes, such as when he says to a foreigner, "I didn't mind the weather very much in the end," said Obi, who had learnt that an Englishman might grumble about the weather, but did not expect a foreigner to join in, found on page 26, as a way of joining in culturally, despite not maybe fitting in physically. This established a sense of self-worth and pride in Obi, which is reflected in his character much later in the story. Due to his European education, Obi struggles to recognize his cultural values due to values needed to take on the colonial world. Think of the time when Obi is told by Clara that she is an Osu, an outcast from the rest, of ancestral lineage that bears a mark of shame on her and her family. Afterwards, when Obi tries to find out why marrying such a girl is forbidden culturally and socially, he finds that his pride and his ignorance of his culture cloud his judgment and thinking, shown when he tries to bring it up with his friend Christopher. Christopher tries to make him see reason, telling Obi, "Look at me, Obi." Joseph invariably asks people to look at him. What you are going to do concerns not only yourself, but your whole family and future generations. If one finger brings oil, it soils all the others. In future, when we are all civilized, anybody may marry anybody. But that time has not come. We of this generation are only pioneers, found on page 78. Even Christopher is afraid that Obi will somehow screw up for not knowing how to act properly among his peers and perhaps embarrass himself. Take it when Obi debates marrying Clara with his father, when he asks of him, "What is this thing?" Our fathers in their darkness and ignorance called an innocent man Osi, a thing given to idols, and thereafter he became an outcast, and his children and his children's children forever. But have we not seen the light of the gospel? He argues, and after I omit a bit, his father replies, "I beg of you, my son, not to bring the mark of shame and leprosy into your family." Pages 151 through 152. Obi doesn't understand why his father is acting this way because he has grown up to European customs. accepted by him despite in reality being forced onto his people through generations of abuse and oppression. His pride and his hubris, a result of his European education, prevent him from truly seeing what is dragging him down, which is ignorance's misunderstanding of his own culture. As once said by M. César in his paper Discours sur le Colonialism, where he says, "I am talking millions of men who have been skillfully infected with fear, inferiority complexes, trepidation, servility, despair, abasement." Obi is only an example of that. In such a fashion, carrying these feelings establishes him as a character who does not believe that it is social structure bringing him down because of his perceived reality through his accomplishments in position and power shown through his work and education. Eventually, these collective struggles slowly culminate in a breaking point that turns him against his beliefs in an attempt to understand the world around him. As a result, Obi resorts to being hypocritical of his morals in the end by disconnecting and losing his identity while trying to find his place in Nigeria. These experiences throughout the story shape him to complete desensitization, complete in the aftermath after he loses his mother. Such is categorized when we see that then he remembered the story of King David, who refused food when his beloved son was sick, but washed and ate when he died. He too must have felt this kind of peace. Must have felt this kind of peace. The peace that passeth all understanding, which is found on page 187. He is morally destroyed, his life uprooted, and his feelings scattered for not understanding the world around him. These colonial power struggles for submission, profit, and power to prove the worthiness of industrial nations against one another has brought him down. Believing himself to be emotionally isolated, coupled with the fact that he had many bills to pay during this period of time, it's no surprise that he turned to bribery to support himself. In the words of Achebe when describing him during this period of time, whenever he thought of it, these thoughts gave Obi a queer kind of pleasure. They seemed to release his spirit. He no longer felt guilt. He too had died. Beyond death there are no ideals and no humbug, only reality, which is found on page 190. Facing the reality of money and deviation from his morals, the morals that had guided him his whole entire life, being desensitized to such harsh realities, such as Clara not wanting to marry him, and his dead mother, felt like a good excuse to take bribes and participate in criminal activities that gave him reparations socially and financially. Onlookers during this time also noticed how Obi had dramatically changed, with one from the Umuofia Progressive Union commenting that a man may go to England, become a lawyer or a doctor, but it does not change his blood. It is like a bird that flies off the earth and lands on an anthill. It is still on the ground, which is found on page 121. Noting his change of heart and indifference for not attending his mother's funeral for lack of funds, will to believe that she wasn't dead, and to part with the memory of her was too much to bear for Obi. Instead of going like his previous self might have, he took solace in the fact that there was one less person to judge him for his actions, and because of her familial and cultural ties to his upbringing, it was another stressor taken off his shoulders, another excuse for not choosing to believe or associate with his own culture, his way of conforming with another oppressive one. To sum it up, all in the wise introductory words of Frantz Fanon in his famous work, Black Skin, White Masks, supply a single answer, and the color problem would be stripped of all of its importance. What does a man want? What does a black man want? To answer this question for Obi Okonkwo, he has turned against his morals to conform to the oppressive, corrupt English society that raised him. To be able to raise himself out of his social and financial straits, he had to first experience what it meant to be broken down emotionally, and it forced him to change his perspective to that of a colonizer, then to the identity of one who had risen out of the colonized. This act of hypocrisy of his morals was gradually forced upon him as a quick and simple solution to find his identity, understand the cultural aspect of him that had long since been gone, and to come to terms with how far he had changed and fallen upon his own life. Upon trying to conform, however, he fell, resulting in the actions mentioned at the beginning of the story and culminating with the steps we see unfolding at the end. Why did it happen? Well, to conform to an oppressive society's ways at the expense of acting against Obi's morals and judgments of his own culture. In the good words of T.S. Eliot from The Journey of Maggie, to describe Obi's journey throughout his life after his English education, we return to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death. Thank you.